Hey and welcome everyone. Today on Skylines Summer Session, myself and Gregor are joined by Wim Matthyssen. Hopefully I got that right. He's an Azure MVP from Belgium. A very warm welcome, Wim. It's good to have you on the show today.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be here. And you almost spelled my name correctly, so it was good for me.
Cool. So today you're going to give us a little talk about Azure Spend. So to kick things off, just tell us a bit about yourself and what you do day to day.
So my name is Wim Matthyssen. I live in Belgium. I work as a cloud architect. So my daily job, I'm completely focused on Azure and the Azure hybrid services. I do all kind of things like making high-level designs, low-level designs, even doing implementations. I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer, so I also deliver Azure trainings. And since July, I'm honored with the Microsoft MVP award in Azure, just like you guys. I'm also a board member of a Belgium user group called MC2MC. So we do a lot of stuff around Azure and the Microsoft 365 platform. So yeah, we blog a lot, we offer talks, whatever things, all online these days. I also have my own blog, wimatthyssen.com, where I blog a lot about my daily experiences with Azure and all other Microsoft services. So that's me in a nutshell.
Cool, nice one.
Cool.
I've got a couple of questions for you before we kind of move on to your slides. Do you think customers are aware of just how much they're spending each month on Azure?
For a lot of people, it's really different. They start with Azure, they start deploying things, and they just click around in the portal for beginners. And then at the end of the month, they get a really high bill, and they need to pay it, and they really don't know why. Yeah, probably it's just because they click around. If they do it in a more governed way, so in a more infrastructure as code, like they say, they have more control. But mostly smaller companies or people just starting off, at the end of the month, they can be surprised about the bill, the Azure bill. So it's a thing you should really keep in mind, because at the end of the month, someone needs to pay it. And yeah, it can be sometimes tricky. And there are a lot of things you need to think about.
Cool. So do you think more could be done to help people become more aware of what they're spending, like during the month or whatnot?
Yeah, there are a lot of tools already and services already integrated in Azure you can use. Let me go ahead and share my slide. That's maybe a little bit easier. Do you guys already see my screen? Probably not. There it is.
Yep.
Let me pop up my slide deck. That's maybe easier.
So,
yeah. So there are three things that can help you with managing that cloud spend across your complete organization. First of all, a good starting point is really to understand and estimate your cost across your organization. We're up and running, so you already deployed some Azure resources. You can start optimizing your environment so that you're able to lower your costs, and which can help you to deliver more with a given budget. So probably someone higher up in the organization says, yeah, you may spend $1,000, €1,000 or whatever, and then you can limit it and you can work to that specific budget. And as a third part, you should try to get control and analyze your cost so you can make specific departments or teams accountable for the use of their specific Azure resources. So at the end of the month, you can split up the bill to a specific department so they can pay it.
So what kind of tools can you use to control and analyze the costs?
Yeah. So first of all, start with understanding your cost. Everybody knows the traditional IT way. People start buying hardware, printers, whatever. So that's the CapEx model. With the use of more cloud-based application and workloads, like any Azure service or resource, companies more shift from that CapEx model to an OpEx model. This removes them from the heavy upfront investment and replace those with the consumption-based. So they're only going to pay what they use. So probably everybody knows that. And they will have a predictable monthly fee. So yeah, that's a good starting point. Know those differences, because it's a total different way how to spend your money in a company when you buy something. There are a few tools to start off, quite simple. It's the Azure Pricing Calculator and the Total Cost of Ownership Calculator. The Azure Pricing Calculator is just an URL. It's a free tool. You can use it to make an estimation of whatever resource you want to deploy. You fill it in, it calculates the cost, and you have a sort of estimation about, if I set up this and this in this way, it will cost me at the end of the month this. Next to that, you also have the TCO calculator. I don't see that one being used a lot by people, but the TCO calculator is a tool to estimate cost savings, where you can check when you migrate your on-premises workloads to Azure. When you define those specific workloads, you fill in a list of assumptions, and at the end you can review a report which will give you the savings when you move those workloads to Azure over a specific time frame, so let us say for 5 years. And then you can see the difference if I'm still run those workloads on-prem or when I'm running those workloads on Azure. So by using both calculators, you already can get a good idea of what your Azure costs are going to be and what the difference is when you're running those workloads on-prem.
Nice.
Cool. I've never actually seen a TCO calculator before, so that's good to know.
Did you never want?
Yeah.
I can show you if you want. Let me stop sharing. So I have it opened over here. So the pricing calculator, probably everyone's seen that one before. Maybe I can demo a little bit later. This one is the total cost of ownership one. It's also just an URL. And then you start filling in. You have a specific workload. You type in the name. You choose your workload. Probably it's a VM, is it an app, whatever. Is it on a physical server? You choose the operating system. You can if you're running 100 VMs, for example, you can do this for 100 VMs at one place. Then you can add specific databases. Then you can define your storage. So if you're using a SAN or a NAS file share, whatever, how many storage are you using? You all fill it in. You can fill in your networking. And then you go next, you fill in the assumption, even your electricity bill you can fill in. So to really have a complete comparison. And then at the end, it will give you a really detailed template about what your the difference is going to be. So yeah, if you're starting with Azure and you really want to know what the complete difference is, I would advise just go through this one. It's a lot of work because you need to fill it in. It's not yet that you can upload to CSV like you can do with the other things, like for example with Azure Migrate or whatever. But yeah, it can really help you to have a good understanding about your basic costs whenever you move a specific workload to Azure.
That's cool. I really like it.
So, and that's one that not a lot of people are aware of, in my opinion.
Yeah, I certainly wasn't.
And I think a good starting point is also when you make your estimation, it's mostly time to make a design. Most people in bigger companies start with making a design. And the first thing you need to choose is how are you going to do your cloud migration. So probably you guys already heard about the 5 R's. With the 5 R's can really help you to choose the right way to move your workloads to the cloud. First of all, you have the rehost, just a lift and shift. You pick up your VM from on-prem, and you place it almost exactly the same in your Azure environment. You also have the refactor and the re-architect, where you're going to rethink your application to make it, for example, you have a single VM on-prem, and you want to make it high available in Azure and more scalable, for example. You can also completely revise or re-platform your workload, where you move your specific VM workload, for example, a SQL Server, to a PaaS service like Azure SQL Database or something. Next to that, if you're a good developer, I'm not, probably Greg is, you can completely rebuild your application or rewrite it and then the last one is you can also replace it by a SaaS application. You just buy an application that has the same work like your workload you want to move. You just buy it and you start using it. But you should really keep in mind, depending on which approach you will choose, when those workloads are moved and running in Azure, the monthly cost can totally be different in whatever step you are. Because if you move simply to VMs, IaaS VMs are probably going to be a lot expensive than when you move that specific workload to a PaaS offering, or even when you just buy the SaaS one, for example, where you just need to use it and you don't need to do the maintenance anymore. You don't need to do the updates. You just take care of people start using the app, for example. So that's a good starting point. Also know which R you want to choose and think about it. Luckily, there are also a lot of resources that really can help you with your cloud migration journey, if you may say it like that. First of all, probably everybody already heard about the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework. It's a collection of documentation that provides you with implementation best practices and tools. If you start designing and architecting your new workloads, a good resource, also an online resource, is the Azure Architecture Center. There you can find all kinds of implementation examples, which can really guide to make a good design. Also, we have Azure Migrate. It's an Azure service which can help you to discover, assess, and migrate your on-premise resources. If I'm correct, I think Sarah already did a talk about it in the previous recording. Yep. So I would advise go check that one out, because she probably did a good thing about telling us about that specific service. And if you're really starting with Azure and you really don't know how to get started with your cloud migration or how to take your first steps, you can also check out the Azure Migrate program. And there you can find specific third parties that can help you in your cloud migration, that can assist you. You can ask some questions. It's a form you can fill in, and then you can see if they can help you.
Nice.
Cool. I didn't know about that one either.
That's if you're working as a consultant, and that's one a lot of companies we advise, check it out, and then sometimes they come to the company for I work. We also get customers from over there. So it's if you're not really sure how to do things, it's a good starting point. You can also get in contact with Microsoft. Not everyone has a direct line with Microsoft for assistance, so it's a good way to start. So if you use those 4 resources and check them out and do it, I would advise do it step by step, because you guys also know it's a lot to cover and there are a lot of options available. So think before you start deploying, and don't just click around in the Azure portal, because the spend is going to be really high.
Yeah. Agreed.
So another important thing is choosing the right subscription type. It's also an important step in the design process, because you have all the different types have different rates, different offers, and different benefits. The ones mostly seen in companies are enterprise agreements or the Microsoft customer agreements these days. And the things as a cloud party we offer to customers via the Cloud Solution Provider program, those subscriptions. When you're using one of those, the prices of your Azure resources will differ significantly than when you're just using a pay-as-you-go subscription, where you just pay at the end of the month with your card, like they say.
So it's best for people who are going to look at Azure to look at maybe start off with a pay-as-you-go and then move to either an enterprise agreement or an MCA,
But you should keep in mind, if you start off with a pay-as-you-go, in a later phase, you want to switch to, for example, I now have a pay-as-you-go and I want to go to a CSP, or I want to evolve to an enterprise agreement. Depending of the source subscription and a destination subscription, the way you need to move your resources is going to be different. For some switches, it's just administrating billing change at the back end. And for other subscription switches, you need to really going to move your resources, and probably not all resources can be moved. So also keep that one in mind. It really depends from which subscription you start and to which subscription you're moving. So from CSP to CSP, it's just a switch in the back. But for example, I think from you also have something like the Visual Studio subscriber licenses, the test and the MSDNs. If you switch that one to a CSP, for example, it's a little bit trickier. And you have also the CSP version 1 and you have the CSP version 2. So yeah, it's a little bit complicated and it's not just one click and we're in our new subscription. It's going, depending on which switch you want to do, it's going to be a little bit more work and maybe you can't move everything. So also keep that one in mind. It's a good question.
Yeah, good advice.
Also a good one to know, and probably I don't think a lot of people know that. It's also good to know all your other software licenses, like for example your SQL Server licenses, because they can be different and help in a later phase. And for example, when you're using an enterprise agreement or a Microsoft customer agreement, you also have the option to choose for an enterprise dev test subscription, which gives you special rates for some services, like for example, VMs and SQL databases. So if you start up that kind of subscription in your AI, you can, for example, use a SQL Server with a developer license coupled. So the price is going to be lower than when you use your enterprise license for SQL. And that way you can also lower the cost. The only thing you should keep in mind is when you're doing those things, it's really for dev test. So you can't connect to any production environment or any production data. Otherwise, when you ever have an audit from Microsoft, you're probably going to need to pay a fee because you're working with production workloads on a really dev test environment. So, but it's the thing, if you start testing with Azure and you have an AI, we'll also look at that specific type of subscription because, in my opinion, not a lot of people are aware of that. So I'm not a licensing specialist, but it can really help lower your cost, especially for tests. And like you guys probably also know, there are a lot of free services. So they're around 25 plus, I think. You also, these days, we have dev test labs, where you can spin up your VM, just do your stuff, and you just pay for the VM only, and that's it. And I don't know if you guys know about the Azure Marketplace test drive.
Nope.
So that's also a nice one. Wait, let me close my slides. So I'll move this one. It looked like this. You just go to the site, the Azure Marketplace, and there are a lot of vendors which will give you a test license for testing out, for example, the Palo Alto or the FortiGate. And you can run it and start it up even if you don't have any Azure subscription. So you can, it's backed up. You can test it, depending on which offering you choose. You can test it for a month. So if you ever need to deploy a specific firewall in Azure and you're not sure, probably you want to test the one you're using on-prem, or you want to use Azure Firewall, whatever you want to use, know about this option where you can spin up those things, test them out, and that's for €0. So that's also a nice one if you start testing around.
Very cool.
So let me spin up my slide deck again. There it is. Other things, you should design decisions that can impact your cost. An important one is choose a correct storage. And that's not only from a replication perspective, where you have the option between LRS, GRS, ZRS, and RRGRS. And depending on which one you choose, how higher you're up in the end, the more they're going to be cost, and the SLI going to be higher, but it's also more expensive than Their GRS is going to be completely different pricing than the locally redundant storage. Also important is the choice of tier and the storage options you can make. You can really difference for your monthly cost. I don't know, you also should take a look at the Azure Blob Storage Lifecycle Management, which will offer you a rule-based policy creation for blob storage accounts and will assist you with how the storage is handled over a period of time. So maybe you can start with the hot tier, and then after a month, it automatically moves to the cold tier, and a month later, it can move to the archive tier. So that can also help you to limit your spending cost for the storage. Another nice one to know is deploying Azure resources in VMs into a different region can also save you money because various regions have cheaper rates than others. But you should be aware of your compliancy and other legal requirements. So if you need to deploy in Europe, for example, for a GDPR or whatever, then you can't move your deploy resource in East US, for example. But if it's just for dev test and you're not need to follow any regulations, you can always switch between regions also to lower your cost. So that's also a thing you can do. I can show you guys if you want.
Is that something you could demo in the
Yeah. So if you open up the pricing calculator, so here it is. For example, let me choose storage accounts because that was a thing. You click on the view one. So I will leave the region like it is. It's the East US. You can see the redundancy is the LRS and the access tier is hot. Yeah, if you're in another currency, you can change it at the bottom. So I will put it in euros. So the LRS in the hot, it's around 70 euros. If you change it to ERA GRS, it's already 49 euros. If it's changed from the hot tier to the cold tier, it drops to 35 euros. And if you go to the archive tier, it's just 2 euros. So you can really play around with it. Also, if you test it out with specific VMs, for example, there's also a difference between the Europe regions if you spin up specific VMs and the East US region. But you should also be aware that not every Azure resource is available in every region. For example, Azure Bastion, it's not available everywhere. So also keep that one in mind if you start testing and you start deploying everything in East Australia or something, or East US. Maybe some things are not available. So also don't look at it from a cost perspective, but also from the complete package. So you can build your test environment like you want to use it in your production environment. So with all the same resources and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a thing you can do. So you can really check it out with it also generates a really nice document. So you can save all your settings and you can really make your money count if you use this one. So let me open my slides again. Also for the Azure Compute, we have some design decisions that are really important. It all starts with choosing the right VM series and the size. Still a lot of people just do a one-to-one translation from on-prem. So they have a VM with specific CPU and memory, and you just map it one-to-one to an Azure VM. But yeah, then the price will be really high. Most of the time, they have then a lot of too lot of vMemory, too many vCPUs, and at the end of the month, you have an over-provisioned VM, which results in really unnecessary costs. Also, an important thing to mind is the managed disk options and the available SLA. They can also play an important factor in the monthly costs of your VM. You should know that there now is already a virtual machine connectivity SLA for a single VM with standard AGB. So before it wasn't there, now it's around 95% if I'm correct. You also should check out B-series VMs. for any workload that's not CPU intensive. And you probably also heard about the Azure Spot VMs, which you can use for workloads that can be interrupted. Like for example, batch VMs, we're running batch jobs or processing jobs. So if Microsoft drops those, really workload isn't that interrupted, so it may stop and it can start whenever the VM pops up again. So you can also take a look at both things. You should also start trying to think beyond IaaS. A lot of people who work a lot of on-prem are still used to physical servers and VMs. And as a starting point, you want to start using VMs in Azure, but they should really start thinking beyond VMs. They should try to use a cloud optimized strategy and look into container instances, AKS, app service fabric. For example, they can use the following flowcharts, which is shown on the slide. That one you can also find in the Azure Architect Center, and it can really help you to select the right candidate for your compute service, like they say. So there are a few things that can help you.
Cool. I like that diagram. That flowchart is really good.
Yeah, there are a lot of those are in the Azure Architect Center. Also, where you need to make a decision for networking. There's also different flowcharts because there are also a lot of options available to do any kind of networking in Azure. So they can really help you if you're not completely sure. So next to that, there are also a lot of ways to optimize your Azure environment to lower cost when you're already started and already running resources in Azure. One of them is a good way to lower your IaaS cost is by using reserved instances, the RIs, where you make a reservation of resources and capacity for either 1 or 3 years. You can pay that specific amount upfront, or you can even pay it now each month, just like you used to pay your Azure bill at the end of the month. You can do it in the same way. You can also combine this one with the hybrid use benefit hub, where you will use your existing Windows or SQL licenses with software assurance. That's really important for your Azure VMs and or SQL servers running in Azure. And I think a combination of both can save you up to 82% of your spending.
So can reserved instances be for, I was just going to ask exactly that question.
That's the one. Yeah. Sorry.
Awesome.
So it's not only, to answer your question, that it's not only for VMs. You can also use reservations for SQL, for premium SSD managed disks from P30s, I think, up to P80s. But you can also use it for SUSE Linux, Azure Databricks, Azure Cache for Redis. And this list is being filled up. So probably if you look at it within 3 months, probably a lot of other resources and services will be available. So
definitely grown since I last looked at it.
Yeah, I think when I looked at it a lot of time ago, it was only for VMs and for the storage, for some storage, the premium disk. But now I opened it up a few months ago, and I was really surprised about all the resources that were available. So the Azure dedicated host is already on there. So yeah, the list is expanding. So that's really nice. And I don't think if everybody is aware of all the resources that already can be used with reservations. So really take a look at those one too, because it can really, if you're really sure you're going to use a specific resource for at least a year, you should really take a look at those ones. If it's not already on that list, and then you can lower your cost in that way also. So a nice one to use also, I don't know if you guys know that one, it's Azure Hybrid Benefit Calculator. It's something also in the pricing calculator, you can select hub and it will do it. But this is a separate calculator, especially focusing on hub whenever you want to use something. So, and then you can see what cost savings can help you or lower your cost in that way. The only thing with Hub, and that's something I see a lot of customers forget, is that they really need to have software assurance, and not every customer has software assurance, because that's a really important factor. So there are also some other tools that can help you optimize. Probably everyone knows the Azure Advisor. It's a free service you can use in the Azure portal or through the API, Azure PowerShell, or whatever way you want to use it, which give you personalized best practices to optimize your Azure workloads. And like, for example, for cost recommendations and potential cost savings, it's, I always say to customers, your free in-house cloud consultant. So you can open it up and it can give you advice not only on cost, also on security, high availability, operational excellence. So yeah, start using it. It's there, it's free, and it can save you money. So use it. If you started off from IaaS, so for a lot of customers, the first step, or for a lot of people, the first step is move their on-prem VM, like we already said, to Azure and run it in the way they're familiar with it in IaaS VM. But when they're VMs, it shouldn't be the end state. It's really a time to modernize, and there are a lot of options to go away from VMs and to go further than VMs. So maybe you can start off with an Azure IaaS file server. You can move on to Azure Files. You maybe have some domain controls running as an IaaS VM. You can take a look at Azure Domain Service and switch in that way. You can have DNS servers, a lot of DNS options available in Azure these days. Azure DNS Private Zones is there. If you're using a print server, it's not my advice to use a print server in an IaaS VM, but it's possible, but it's not because it's possible you need to do it. But you can also now take a look at, for example, Universal Print. And for a lot of workloads, there probably is something you can use in PaaS to switch it, or you can combine PaaS, Azure Functions, or whatever to get that specific workloads not running in a VM anymore. So also to lower costs. So, and then, yeah, an easy one and other ways to keep your costs down in Azure. First of all, you can delete all unused Azure resources, like, for example, public IP addresses that we see a lot in environments. People start testing stuff to easily connect to their VMs, not in a really secure way, to just connect it with associated with a PIP. When they're not using that VM anymore, they delete the VM and the PIP stays there, but the PIP is in euros, I think about 100 euros almost. So if you keep a lot of those PIPs hanging around in your environment, yeah, price can go up. You can also delete any unused Azure storage accounts, because they're also already spinned up for a lot of things. But when the specific resource isn't used anymore, it's still there and you need to pay it at the end of the month. And if when you're running IaaS VMs, probably a lot of those VMs don't need to run 24/7. So you can stop them during off hours, like for example in the weekend or after business hours. You can deallocate them, and then you only need to pay for the storage costs and not for the VM itself anymore. You can use, for example, the auto shutdown directly from the VM blade, or I think it's Gregor's favorite, I think, the Azure Start Stop solution during off hours in Azure Automation. I think he wrote a blog about it, but yeah. You may tell everything about that one, Greg.
Oh, you're all right.
So, there are a lot of options that can lower your costs. Look at them. You don't need to use everything. A really easy one is just delete everything that's not used anymore. So start getting familiar with looking at your environment every month. You can automate a lot of stuff. You can monitor it, whatever, and see whatever resource you can stop or you can delete, so that at the end of the month, the cloud spend is a lot lower than before, because someone higher in the chain probably is going to be really happy if the costs go down. So really start looking at those things.
Have you
So
got any Is there any other Azure services which help you kind of remain informed and in control of your costs?
Yeah, there are a lot of ones. Let me show that one. For example, you can use Azure management groups to group all your different subscriptions. So a lot of companies have more than one Azure subscription, and it's really difficult to keep them all organized. By using management groups, you can not only manage access and policies, but you can also the costs, and you can do it in an organizational or in an environment-based or a combined hierarchy. Next to that, also apart from your Azure governance strategy, is that you can use resource tags to tag resources for billing. Like a resource tag always exists about a name of and a value. So if you use the name cost center, for example, and as a value, you can specify a specific department or something else. And then you can easily check or control who's responsible to pay for those specific resources at the end of the month. So it's simple things. If you start building, you can implement tags in your infrastructure as code and add them to every resource. So start using them. They can really help you not only to specify specific metadata for cost center, but also for all other kind of things, for automation and stuff like that. Next to that, you also have a built-in and a free tool called Azure Cost Management, previously called Cloudin, which can help you with your cloud cost analysis. By monitoring and managing your, in that way you can manage and monitor your costs across all your clouds, even for AWS. That's currently in private preview, I think. So if you're working in a multi-cloud environment and you're using AWS in combination with Azure and also some on-prem resources, you can monitor all of them and look at the costs. There even is now an option called Azure Cost Management Labs. It's available in the Azure Preview portal, and which will give you a sneak peek in what's coming in the Azure Cost Management. That's also nice to take a look at. With Azure Cost Management, you can define budgets and credit alerts. So for a specific resource group, for example, you can set a specific budget, let us say 200 euros. When the resources in that specific resource group reach, for example, let us say you put in 90% of that specific budget, you can get an alert that will notify you that the budget is almost there. It will not drop your resources or stop them. It will just inform you that you're almost at your cloud spend. So if you do it for specific departments, you can get in contact with those guys or girls or whatever. Please lower your cost because you're almost at your spending, at your limit. So take a look at your resources, which one you can start and stop and stuff like that. So in that way, you can increase the organization accountability and between the different departments. And a last one to use, probably everyone is also aware of that one, is Azure Policy. It will allow you to control your costs and set up specific policies to implement a form of cost controls and to guardrail your environment. For example, you can set a policy which only allows the deployment of certain VM sizes in your environment, or you can restrict that, for example, public IPs can't be deployed. You can also enforce that specific resource tag, like that one for Cost Center, for example, is always required whenever you deploy something in Azure. And you can also say that you only want resources being deployed in the West Europe region, for example. So people can't spin up any resources in the American regions or in the Australian region, for example. So you can really get in control. Let me show that one in the portal maybe. So if you go, just type in policy. I already put one of them in place, I think. It's starting up. So for example, I have one for the SKUs. You can set it in not in remediation mode. You can just set it in audit mode. So I already spin up some VMs in advance, so I can see that some of them are probably not compliant to that specific policy. I also have the allowed locations. In my scripts, in my testing environment, I always deploying in West Europe. So, and I put an allowed location to West Europe. So you can see that all my resources are compliant to those. So you can start checking everything from there also. You can also start remediation. So every resource that doesn't match a specific policy can be adjusted, but you need to keep, you need to be aware that that can trouble some resources because they can be dropped or they can be stopped or whatever. So yeah, take care of those ones. Don't do that directly. You also have cost management. You can do it from the sidebar, or you just can type in the search bar at the top. So you go to cost management. You can open the cost management. It will take its time. You have that cost analysis over here. You can click on it. Now for a specific scope, which you specify, I have now a specific management group, for example. And for August, yeah, that specific management group, all subscriptions underneath that one, yeah, cost me around 38 euros. If you want to have a good overview of all your management groups with all the subscriptions lists underneath them, there's an easy way to do it. If you go to the Azure Security Center, you can click on it. You can choose security policy. And now you see a nice preview of all your management groups and which subscription is underneath which specific management group. So that's an easier way than working from the management group blade. For example, another thing I can show you is the Azure Advisor. So it's also by default in the sidebar. If you click on it, you can see it at 5 dashboards. One of them is a cost one. You just read the recommendations are recalculated. You can click on it. For example, you can see I have a public IP that's not associated anymore. You can click on the quick fix. It will identify that specific public IP. You can delete it. You can go and you can just click on the delete button and it's gone. So it will, with the quick fixes, it will directly put you in the right place where you can do a specific action to do whatever it's supposed to do, like delete on that specific IP. So now probably my spend at the end of the month will be 30 euros less than before. So yeah, there are a lot of things you can use these days.
Very cool.
So I have some key takeaways if you guys are interested in those.
Definitely.
Yeah. So in my opinion, always start with a good design. Take your time, look at everything, do an estimation of your costs, look at all SLA and high availability options, and see that it really matches your environment like you want to use it, and that everything is in place before you start deploying any Azure resource. You should start using all free built-in tools like Azure Advisor, Azure Cost Management, and there are a lot of other ones that can really help you to optimize and really govern your environment. If you start using Azure, try to think beyond the IaaS. Look at those plus offerings, look at Azure Functions, look at AKS, containers, Azure Web Apps, whatever. If it's possible and you have the time, sometimes a migration is timely driven, and the easiest approach is to do a lift and shift and do it within a specific time frame. But if you really have the time to do it properly, try to split things up and try to separate your workloads and find the best solution available in Azure. Also, remain in control of your environment. So start using Azure Policy, start off with a good Azure governance plan, use tags, use resource logs, whatever resource you want, whatever things that really can help you to really remain in control. And the most important one to remember, keep an eye on your cloud spend. So look at it every month, try to delete unused resources, try to change VM sizes if you're running specific VMs, try to switch regions, try to start-stop solutions. There are a lot of things that really can help you to lower your costs at the end of the month.
Cool, nice one.
All right.
So if I'm just
Some good tips.
Yep, very good tips. Love it. Just before we go, we've got a couple of fun questions for you. So I've got two, and Richard's got one. So first of all, I want to ask you: is that the Surface 2 headphones that you're wearing?
Yeah, those are, and they're really working really good. Even the mix and yeah, with the COVID situation, I'm working with my wife in the same office, in the same room. And she also needs to make a lot of calls. And even when I'm doing a Teams meeting, I really can change the background noise. And people even don't hear her. And her voice is sometimes really high. So if people are going into a discussion, they're really nice. They're working, and they're also a lot of time. The run time is really long. I don't need to put them really often in the electricity. So I'm really happy with them.
Yeah, I'm loving mine as well.
Yep. And they're quite easy to set up between devices. You can really switch quite easily. So yeah.
Cool. So my question is, I've seen quite a lot of your presentations, and you always use like a movie theme. How do you think of these? Like, how many movies have you actually watched?
Really a lot, I think. Thousands of movies, and I do a lot of duo presentations, and most of the time the other person always says, just you choose a theme and fill it up, and mostly it's spot on because we can use that one with that specific setup. So I have another session tomorrow, and it's also with a complete movie theme. So it's a lot of work because you need to look at the specific pictures, you need to fill them in, you need to write the quotes, you need to think about it. But I really enjoy making my presentations. But it takes a lot of time, and you need to watch a lot of movies and series, I think.
Good for you. Okay, cool. So, Wim, thanks very much for taking time out today to spend.
You're welcome.
Chatting about Azure and Azure Spend. I think myself and Richard have certainly learned a couple of new things, that's for sure. So we'll go off and look at that in a bit much more detail. But a big thank you for coming on.
You're welcome for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thank you.